All right. Welcome, welcome, everyone. We are here at the Environmental Science Center's third Moonlight Beach Walk. You can't tell from here because I am indoors in the warmth, but we do have 4 naturalists who are out on the beach tonight. And we are fortunate to do this with sponsorship. Welcome, welcome, everyone. You can hear all my echoes. We are here at the Environmental Science Center's third Moonlight Beach Walk. Hold on, let me straighten this out. You can't tell from here. Oh, technology. So we have echoes in here, we have wind out there, but we think that tonight we're going to have smooth communication, which is really exciting. So we have sponsorship from the King County Flood Control District through Ryan 9 to put on these annual events. We also have funding through the Shin Yuen Foundation and through Foundry 10, and a partnership with the city of Burien to be out on the beach in the park when no one else is in the park. So I'm very excited to be putting these on with the Environmental Science Center. I'm Carly Rose, the Community Engagement Manager, and tonight I will be hosting and answering questions, so you can ask them through Zoom in the Q&A section. And if somebody asks a question, you can click it that you like it so that we know more people want to know. If you're on Facebook, just put things in the comments and we'll try to relay them to the naturalists in the field, and also another virtual naturalist we have with us tonight.
Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa. I'm a naturalist at the Environmental Science Center, and I am obviously from my home tonight, coming at you from the coziness here, but we've got our 4 naturalists out in the field. I'm going to be supplementing the critters that they find with some extra information, some extra pictures and videos, so I can't wait to see what they find out on the beach. It looks like, Jackie, you're muted right now.
All right. Hi, team. Thanks for joining us. I am one of the 4 naturalists out here on the beach. And we'll get a chance to introduce our other 4. But my name is Jackie, and we are here at the lovely Seahurst Park on the beach tonight. And we do have a little bit of wind, but we are going to find all of the critters that we can in our tide pools tonight. And before we head down towards the water, we're going to take a little bit of time to get to know our site here and get to know some of the other naturalists that are joining, because you're going to hear our voices, but we want you to see all of our critters, and you might not see our faces again until the end. So I'd like to get to introduce everyone to all of our naturalists. So we have Rosie here. Awesome. Naturalist Rosie. She is our program coordinator. Great. I'll get this right. We have Kelly, who does a lot of our grant writing and is how we got the funding for being able to put on our programs here. And we have Joanna joining us. Awesome. She is a former naturalist, former program coordinator, current executive director. So we will all be out here getting a chance to share with you some of the fun critters that we find. And as we're getting started, we'd like to take some time to acknowledge that we are on the traditional unceded lands of the Muckleshoot, Duwamish, Suquamish, and other Coast Salish people, and take this time to honor all of their elders of past and present and future generations. And with gratitude and just really grateful that we are able to learn a lot of the science that we know about our local habitats from our native scientists, and taking this moment to share our gratitude. So as we are moving down to our critters, I'd like to show a little bit of what's around me first. So maybe I can have our lighting change a little bit. We can see that I'm a little bit far away from the water at the moment. I have some of this driftwood, so we're sort of at the high tide line. This is as high as our water is going to get. All this driftwood has come up from our water here. We're going to head down to our low tide in a little bit and check out our animals that are exposed as the water went out. But behind all of our driftwood here, we can see there's some alders, some willow and grasses, nice marshy plants. And this is a little bit more natural than how it may have looked a little bit more recently. There has been some restoration work done here. At one point, there was a seawall here, and Alyssa's going to help share some of that history and how our beach has transformed over time, and some restoration work that's happened here, so that we have what we see behind me here. And while you do that, we're going to go a little bit closer down to the water and go look for some critters.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Jackie. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here as we start to follow our naturalists down to the beach. One of the first things that we do when we're doing these moonlight beach walks in person is hand out some field guides. So I wanted to quickly share how you can access some field guides at home. You can use them tonight to follow along, and I hope that this night kind of encourages you to get out on the beach yourself, take this field guide along with you, and do some exploring with your family and friends. So I've already popped the links for these field guides into the chat, but if you're watching this later or you don't have access to the chat, I just wanted to show everyone how you can find this awesome resource. So you can head to our website, environmentalsciencecenter.org, and when you get there, you're going to go ahead and go to the public events tab on our homepage and click on Moonlight Beach Walks 2021. That'll take you probably to the page that you registered for this event on, but you can scroll down and you will see some coloring pages and also these field guides that you can just download for free from our website. It's a pretty awesome resource. And again, I hope it encourages you to get out and do some exploring in nature yourself. So tonight, our low tide is going to be at 7:50 p.m. So that water is still heading out, and it's going to be a negative 1.1. So this time of year in the winter in the Puget Sound region, our lowest low tides are kind of, in the middle of the night in the dark like this. So if you're going to go exploring in the winter, you're going to need a headlamp, you're going to need some warm gear to get out there on the beach, but especially as things start to warm up, as our low tides start to be in the middle of the day again, like they are in the late spring and summer, it's a great time to go exploring. And you might find some different animals when you're out exploring these night low tides versus the day low tides, but there's a lot of crossover as well. So as Jackie mentioned, before we get to the critters, I also wanted to share a little bit about the history of Seahurst Beach and kind of what's been going on there over the past several decades. So this is a picture before a lot of restoration work was done at Seahurst Park. So in the early 70s, there was a big seawall that was built. So that's what you're looking at in this picture, that big concrete seawall. And it was put in as kind of an idea of how to protect the beach, armor the coastline, and protect it from any erosion that might be happening. And also to create a nice big kind of picnic area, big playground area for families that was protected from the beach and from those waves. But it had the exact opposite impact on the beach. As far as protecting it from erosion, it actually increased erosion. And over the 30 plus years that this seawall was installed at Seahurst, the beach actually lowered by 3 feet. So it dropped 3 feet. That's a lot of sand and gravel being washed away. And not only that, but this seawall and really any coastal armoring like this blocks off the terrestrial habitat from our marine ecosystem. So it can cause a lot of problems blocking nutrients, blocking that kind of nutrient flow between ecosystems and that connectivity that you really need between these habitats. So in 2004, there was a huge restoration project that started. As a matter of fact, the biggest restoration project along the seashore in all of Puget Sound. So pretty incredible. Lots of native plants were put in after 1,000 feet of seawall was removed. Lots of native plants were put into play, and lots of kind of that driftwood, that more natural, softer armoring. And so this is what it started to look like after the project was over. It reopened that connection between the terrestrial and marine ecosystems. And we have seen some big changes taking place. It took about a decade for the whole project, so it wrapped up in 2014, and we're still seeing changes. We're still seeing the nutrients kind of flowing into our coastal ecosystem here, and it's really helping out our seagrass beds. So if you take a walk at Seahurst now, there are lots of lush seagrass beds that are providing tons of habitat for critters like forage fish to lay their eggs in. And you might know those forage fish like Pacific herring are super important in our coastal and marine food webs. They're a link between plankton and bigger animals like the salmon that I think a lot of us in this region know and love. So it's been a huge success story, and it's really helping to improve the biodiversity in our local ecosystem. So not only is the removal of the seawall just, I think, more beautiful with all of the native plants that have been put into play, but it's also a vast improvement for the health of this ecosystem. All right, so with that, I bet our naturalists are settling into place on the beach. So I'm going to keep sharing my screen for a moment so that we can all take a look at our STARS etiquette messaging, our stewardship messaging for how we can help to take care of all these critters on the beach. So I'll turn it back to you guys that are out there in the wild right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Alyssa, for sharing all of that history and all that information about what we're doing out here on the beach. And as we're getting close to our first critter here, right in between the rocks is a little anemone. And we're going to get a chance to take a look at it and get in there and get nice and close. But before we do that, we want to go through our beach etiquette. So things that we want to do when we're out here on the beach, and what you'll want to do if you come out and do a little tide pooling with your family and your friends and you get out here as well. So we like to use this acronym STARS. So each letter stands for something that we want to do as we are exploring on the beach. So our first S stands for step carefully. So as we made our way down here on the beach, we were looking at the ground. We wanted to make sure that we weren't stepping on any critters that were exposed, and that we're also stepping around some more sensitive habitats. So if there are lots of plants and algae somewhere, we don't want to go stomping through there because we don't know what's hanging out underneath all that stuff. So step carefully as we're getting down to the water. Our T is to touch gently with 2 wet fingers. So when we get a chance to touch things, I'm going to take 2 fingers, dip them in our tide pool here, and then use those 2 wet fingers so that we aren't poking anything and we're not grabbing or picking things up. So we can be respectful and be gentle with all of our critters. Our A is animals stay where you find them. A lot of our critters here are very small, and so if we pick them up and even move them a few feet, we could change the entire habitat that they're hanging out in by just moving them a little bit. So we want to make sure that they get to stay in whatever habitat that they wanted to when they got here. So we're going to leave all of our critters right where we find them. R is remove only trash. So we can walk around, and if we find any trash that's safe to pick up, we can pick it up and make sure it gets into a bin. And if we find things like really pretty rocks and shells, we can leave them there for the other critters on our beach here. So there are animals that might use those shells for homes, And as those shells break down and go back into our water, they are going to add nutrients and things that other animals that make shells are going to need. So it's good to leave all of that habitat, all of those homes, all of that nutrients right on the beach where we find it. And S is to share what you learned. So we're super appreciative that you all joined us out here on the beach today. And we hope that you find an animal that's really interesting and you learn something new about it. And you can go and take that knowledge and share with someone that you didn't watch with tonight. So maybe a friend or another family member. And you can share your new fun facts about some of our beach critters here at Seahurst and in the Puget Sound. So I'm going to get us a little bit closer, see if we can get in there a little closer. So we can see right in the back there. See if you can spot it as I'm getting right in close to our anemone here. Nice. Maybe you've spotted it by now. So we have here our little anemone here, and they're a little bit, this one's a little bit different than ones we might find on top of the rocks. Often we'll find aggregating anemones that are in big groups, so they're aggregating, they're staying together. We have a little anemone here, and anemones are related to things like jellies. So they have stinging cells on the end of their tentacles, but a lot of our anemones here are not going to have strong enough stinging cells in order to sting through our really tough skin that humans have. But whenever you touch an anemone, you feel that little sticky part sticking to your fingers. That is them trying to sting you. But luckily, we have really nice, strong skin to help protect us. So our anemone here might be trying to eat some things that are swimming by, or little, that was like, it may have just caught that little shrimp. See how their tentacles are moving? Oh, that was pretty cool. Nice. Yeah, so they'll use those stinging cells to catch their food. And so as we're watching, we can kind of see some of these little bug-looking things jetting around. So little shrimp are in the water here, and our anemone might be trying to grab a little midnight snack. Awesome. And this is just one kind of anemone that we can have here, but Alyssa might have some more images of our anemones and a greater variety, maybe some of those aggregating anemones as well, to share with us as we move from this spot and go look for a few more critters in the rocks that are around us.
Awesome. Yeah, I will share my screen. It was so cool to see predation in action, that anemone like actively, hunting for that that little shrimp, that little amphipod. So I'm going to share some additional images of anemones. Like Jackie mentioned, that was just one type of anemone that you can find on our local beaches, and it looks like it was probably a moon glow anemone. So that's the same one that I've got pictured here on the right-hand side. That kind of right-hand bottom corner image is another moon glow anemone. One of the types that I find really commonly on the beach are those aggregating anemones. And so you might guess from their name, aggregating anemones, that they like to hang out in big groups. So that's what these other images are showing. And that's them at low tide when they're out of the water. They're not in a tide pool. They'll close up like that, pull all those tentacles inside to try to stay nice and cool and wet to survive until the tide comes back and covers them up. So there's no reason for them to be open. There's no food floating past at low tide when they're out of the water. So they end up kind of looking like little sandy, squishy donuts. And a lot of the time, that's what you'll see as you're walking along on the beach. So you want to be careful, of course, not to step on them. And One of the ways that they're able to aggregate or be in these big groups is because they actually will clone themselves. So they will kind of split in half and stretch apart. It kind of looks like if you took a piece of gum and kind of pulled it apart, it makes a figure 8 and then kind of snaps into 2 completely separate anemones. So imagine if you could just make a copy of yourself, and it just keeps doing that, keeps multiplying, and you end up with a whole colony of these anemone clones on the beach. And I also wanted to, before we turn it back to our naturalists on the beach, wanted to show the prey that anemone caught in the tide pool. So this is a little shrimp-like critter called an amphipod. So they are crustaceans. They're related to crabs and lobster. And we've actually got a really cool picture, or video rather, from some microscope footage that was taken in the center. So this is what it looks like swimming around in the water. And that anemone was able to just grab one right out of the water with those sticky, stinging tentacles and kind of pull it right into its mouth in the center. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and check back in with our naturalists on the beach.
Hello, hello. This is naturalist Rosie. Can y'all hear me all right?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderful. All right. So gosh, I was going to try to do zooming again. Hang on just very quickly. I'm going to try a trick that worked once before, which is where we switch the camera. Will that work for us now? No, darn. Okay, well, I'll manually zoom us in. Well, sort of similar to with our anemone that Jackie was just introducing us to, it may be sort of difficult for you to spot our next organism. This is one of the creatures that can sometimes be the hardest to find because they are so incredible at camouflage. I will very slowly try to bring us in here. Excellent. Oh, here we have a beautiful specimen of a mossy chitin. I'm carefully reaching my fingers in to get them just a little bit wet here. I have my 2 wet fingers, but here is our chitin. Let's see if I can help focus. Joanna, could you pull the light back just a little bit? I think that might help it focus. Well, maybe. All right, here we have our chitin. I can tell it's a chitin by the fact that it has not 1, not 2, but 8 segments to its nice, hard, protective shell covering. And then the softer part of its body that's coming out from underneath there is very rough to the touch. It really is like touching moss and helps this creature blend in so beautifully with the rocks around it. The rocks and the barnacles and the mussels, the other organisms around it, just blends right the heck in. Now, a lot of times we'll find organisms on top of barnacles that are there to eat them, and we probably see some of those very shortly. But the chitin actually is not out to eat the barnacles. They are out to eat the algae growing on the rocks. So they will very, very slowly crawl along, and they are scraping up the algae with a special body part called a radula, a body part that is also used by some of these other organisms that we're going to meet very soon. And the radula can be used in predation, as the great word that Alyssa just used, in trying to kill and get at other animals. But the radula of the chitin, similar to the radula of the limpet, is just for that scraping up of algae as they crawl slowly along on the rock, sort of like a little lawnmower. While we're at this spot, wanted to point out a couple other really great organisms. some barnacles. Yeah. Oh, Joanna told me that we have some barnacles feeding. Let's see. Let's see if we can get in close enough. As I said, we're struggling with the Zoom, so we might have to rely on Alyssa to show us a video, but let's see how close we can look at the... I got a little frightened by the flatworm. Oh my God, I see the flatworm. Oh my Lord. I'm afraid of flatworms. I don't blame them for getting nervous. Feeding? It's a little hard to see, but there it is. Oh, Joanna's trying to point out a feeding barnacle. It's a little bit difficult to see. I'm glad we got that flatworm on the move. My goodness. Most of these barnacles are closed up because the tide is out, but there is just the tiniest bit of water. It's very hard to see on camera, but the part that we're looking at does have a little bit of water. Joanna's touching it for us so we can see that there is a little bit of water. Oh, and there it is. There's that little bit of movement. That little barnacle foot, or sort of foot equivalent, reaching out to grab whatever might be left in the water of this tide pool. Awesome. So we do have these. So we have these very small acorn barnacles. We also have these much larger barnacles that Joanna is pointing out. Excellent. Often these larger ones will stay just a little bit open. And oh, like this one here, Joanna, right behind your hand, actually, if you could move your hand. Oh, it's just sort of peeking open like this one right here. And sometimes even our just being near to them will make them close up all the way. Whoop! Close their trap door the rest of the way. All right, I don't want to make you all too motion sick. I'm going to put the iPad back on its little holder here. Thank you, Alyssa. I'll pass it back to you for a moment.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm excited that you guys found some barnacles eating.
And before you pass back, we have a question of what kind of barnacles are the larger ones that you're referring to again?
Oh,
Giant
sure.
barnacles.
Thank you, Alyssa. Yes, sometimes the name is very descriptive and easy to remember.
Sometimes common names are not very creative. So yes, those are giant barnacles. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again so I can share a video with all of you of some barnacles eating. So here we go. It is pretty cool. You can see all of their little their little feet coming out of their shells, munching away on plankton in this video. So if you are lucky enough to find them at high tide under the water or in a tide pool, you'll see them just feasting like this. It's really cool to see these animals move, especially when we're so used to them kind of just looking like this, looking like part of the rock almost. But barnacles are crustaceans. They're cousins to crabs and lobsters. And they are animals, especially when they're little plankton, when they're little larvae, they have pretty well developed eyes. Now they lose some of that as they move into their adult form, since they don't really have too much need for any kind of, advanced eye. Once you're, stuck in place on a rock or on another animal, the back of a crab or something, you're kind of set for life, and you're just waiting for that kind of chemical impulse when the water comes in, when the plankton are all around you, you'll open up and you'll grab that food. But I always recommend to folks, when you're out on the beach along rocks with lots of barnacles on them, if you're really quiet, these rocks that our naturalists are exploring, we call them the whispering rocks, because if you're really quiet and you just kind of listen, you'll actually hear all the barnacles kind of moving, adjusting in their shells, and it sounds like Rice Krispies when you add the milk, snap, crackle, pop. So if you're quiet, you can hear even the smallest little animals kind of moving around and doing their thing, which is pretty cool to be connected to them in that way. It looks like our naturalists might have found something else. Looks like we're set up at another rock, so I will pass it back to all of you.
And as you're being passed, we had another question on if it's difficult to identify those flatworms.
Yeah.
like 2 species, so maybe the different flatworm species themselves.
It's very difficult for me.
All right. I am going to try. I wonder if I can see. Rosie, do you see what I'm looking at right in there?
I don't.
Do you want to hold the iPad steady?
Yeah.
So what I'm looking at is right in this hole right here. There's a little bit of eggs. So yes, last night we were looking at and we found some Dorid eggs, and I actually just found some more, and there's a little Dorid right there. But I was actually surprised that we didn't just see one. We've actually seen another. And so I'm going to kind of slowly move it. We can see all of these giant barnacles as we're kind of moving around to the other side here. Apologies for the fast movements. But if you take a look at this right here, so it doesn't look that attractive. But what we're looking at is another barnacle eating Dorid, and this one is actually in the process of making those eggs, of laying those eggs. And so we've got a big slimy mass here on the wall. And like we were talking about with common names, you know, this one is also not as creative. Anybody want to take a guess as to what that barnacle eating Dorid eats? Oh, if you guess barnacles, you're right. The other funny thing here too is that if you noticed, just off to the corner on my right side, I see something moving by those mussels. And this rock, you know, when these giant barnacles, when they die, they leave behind these shells, and they become such great hiding places for animals. And in fact, nestled in this, these rocks are so many little shore crabs. So what you're looking at right there is just the leg, that movement is the leg of a shore crab as it's moving and probably hiding, not understanding why there's a big light shining on it. Mm-hmm. So these barnacle eating Dorids, it's really hard to find them. And so in the wintertime, the best bet and the trick that I use is I actually look for the eggs. So look for the slimy masses, the little snot hanging down. And then actually the color of that kind of gives you a clue. Like this here at Seahurst, we see a lot of these barnacle eating Dorids. These are kind of white. We also do see sea lemons, and I know Alyssa has some awesome pictures to share with you. And the sea lemon eggs, like the sea lemons, actually are a little bit yellow. So it kind of gives you a clue as to which eggs you're looking at, and perhaps which nudibranch, which Dorid, is going to be close behind. And I realize that I'm not able to hold this as steady as possible, so I apologize for the movement on the screen. We're going to go ahead and pass it back over to Alyssa, and she can show you hopefully some more cool pictures of some Dorids while we find another thing to look at.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Kelly. Okay, let me share my screen again so we can take a look at some awesome Nudibranchs. I know these are a fan favorite. They are one of my personal favorites. I'm always excited when I find a nudibranch on the beach or while diving underwater. So here are kind of my roundup of the 6 most common ones that I find locally. So in the bottom center picture, that is that barnacle eating Dorid that Kelly found. And like she said, if you're looking around and you're finding eggs, that is, I think, a lot of our go-to ways to find them, because eggs aren't moving, and usually they're a lot easier to find. And once you do locate them, that parent is going to be somewhere nearby protecting them. And you can see actually in the bottom right-hand corner, that is a picture of an opalescent nudibranch. Inside of that kind of sandy casing is a moon snail egg case. And the opalescent nudibranch has laid some eggs in there. So those 2 kind of orange, you know, snotty, goopy masses in there are opalescent nudibranch eggs, which is a great spot to lay your eggs, because when they hatch out of there, they have a ton of moon snail eggs to eat. So eggs for the newly hatched babies to feast on. So that's another great tip actually as well when you're looking for these nudibranchs. They are carnivores, they're predators. And so if you can find a moon snail egg case, those sandy egg cases that kind of look like a plunger on the beach, and kind of gently flip them over, oftentimes you'll find nudibranchs under there eating away. Or of course, those barnacle dorids are going to be on rocks with lots of barnacles doing what they do best, eating them up. But yeah, those are a couple of the most common nudibranchs that I find around here regularly. But it looks like our naturalists are set up at another rock, so we'll go ahead and check back in with them.
Awesome. Yeah, so as we were coming around from that other side where we had all those nudibranchs underneath the little overhang, this little ledge, we found a few different crabs. So right down here, we have our kelp crab, and there's one here and one right there in the crack. And these two crabs are related to those barnacles, but instead of living inside of that shell that we can see on the beach, on the rocks here, they are just going to make one very strong skeleton on the outside of their bodies. These kelp crabs are sometimes called shieldback crabs because you can see, especially this one over here, their back kind of looks like the shield of a knight. So they have that kind of shape on their body there. Trying to get a little bit more light for us. Nice. And our kelp crabs, we can identify crabs by looking at their belly underneath, but we can also potentially figure out if they are male or female by looking at their claws. So our male crabs are typically going to have a lot bigger claws like this one here, though it looks like they're missing one of their claws. So this one has a little bit bigger claws. This one is probably a male. I'm not going to dig it out of that little hole. I'm going to let them stay in there. And our other one over here, they don't have that really big, beefy claw. That one's probably a female over there. Again, we're not going to dig it out of its little hiding spot there. We're going to kind of let them be. But I noticed on this one, he's missing one of his big, strong claws. And our crabs have the skeleton on the outside of their body. And so in order for them to get bigger, they have to molt. They slide out the backside of that shell, that skeleton. They are going to puff their body up with seawater, kind of get a little bit bigger than they already are, and then regrow a new exoskeleton, and then squeeze out that extra water, and then they have a little bit of growing space. But when they do that, they can also regrow some of their damaged limbs. So hopefully the next time this little crab here molts, they'll be able to start growing back that arm that they're missing there. And Alyssa might even have some great images of our kelp crabs or other crabs we see here, and maybe that molting process.
Yeah, I have got some images I'm going to share again of, first off, a different view of that kelp crab. So off on the right-hand side here, that is that kelp crab. That really distinct carapace or shell of the kelp crab is really different from a lot of our other local species. And they can kind of be any range from greens to browns to reds in color, depending on just what they have eaten the most of. If they eat a bunch of green algae, they're going to turn green. If they eat a bunch of red algae or shrimp, they'll turn kind of that pinkish red color. So just like imagine whatever your favorite food is, you ate so much of it, you turned that color. And off on the left side, there is a little shore crab in there as well that's doing a really good job camouflaging in amongst those pebbles. So see if you can spot that guy there. But I also wanted to share a couple pictures of the underside of a crab. This is another way, like Jackie mentioned, you can kind of guess the sex of a crab based on how big their crab claws are. Off on the right-hand side here, that's a gravid crab, or one that has a bunch of eggs. So that orange kind of, you know, they can be like the size of a tennis ball when they have a bunch of eggs underneath them. It's really hard for them to walk around. They pretty much will just hunker down under a rock when they have that many eggs. And so that's obviously a female crab. And so they have a much wider belly plate. So off on the left side here, you can see on the top, he's got that little skinny triangle belly. That is a male crab. And on the bottom, she's got that big wide belly plate so that she can carry all of her babies. So that's another way you can tell whether the crab is a male or a female. And like Jackie mentioned, I've also got some cool images of crabs molting or sizing up. So they get too big for their shell. It's kind of like a suit of armor. So imagine if you had a suit of armor when you were a baby, you would definitely not fit into it as an adult. So crabs, especially young crabs, as they're growing a lot at the first part of their life, they are molting multiple times a year, sizing up, getting, you know, new clothes when they outgrow them. So this is a red rock crab kind of in the process of that. Off on the left-hand side, you can see it's crawling out the back of its old shell. It's already started to form its new shell, but it's soft. So it usually takes a crab anywhere from 12 hours to several weeks to kind of harden up that new shell, depending on the species of crab. So usually they'll hide away during that time because they are lacking a lot of protection. And this is what the molt looks like on the beach. So a lot of times you'll walk out on the beach and it looks like, you know, there's a bunch of dead crabs, but don't worry. The odds are a lot of those, if not all of them, are crab molts. So it's just the empty shell of a crab, and it's actually a sign of a very healthy ecosystem. That means that we've got a lot of crabs that are growing, that are needing to grow these new shells. And so if you see something like this, if you take a closer look at it, it won't have its eyes, of course, because they need to take their eyes with them. And it won't smell like a dead crab. And you can gently kind of pop open the back, just like in this right-hand image. And you'll see they even leave the kind of casing from their gills behind. So those kind of peachy, brownish, kind of slimy lumps inside is what's left of the casings of their gills. And then they crawl out and leave that empty suit of armor behind. All right, it looks like our naturalists have found another critter on the beach, so we will check back in with them.
Thanks, Alyssa. This is Joanna here. And I wanted to share, in the glow of the new moon here, we have a dog whelk party. So Rosie shared a gastropod earlier that had that radula, that super strong tongue to lick algae off the rocks. This is one of our predaceous snails. So they have a super strong radula that can drill holes in shells. You might see shells on the beach that have that perfect circular hole. Looks like a jeweler made that hole, but it was actually done by our moon snail or our dog whelk. So you can see a lot of them out here partying, and what looks like little yellow grains of rice are their eggs. So inside each dog whelk egg, there's 6 or 7 dog whelk babies, and they are pretty voracious predators. The first dog whelk to hatch out of that egg case eats all of its brothers and sisters on the way out of the egg case. So from my view, yeah, I have at least a dozen dog whelks here and easily hundreds of eggs on the beach. And it's interesting to note we are surrounded by kelp crabs. Jackie was talking about kelp crabs earlier, and we find that they do. Oh, we have a molt here. Good spot, Kelly. We find often, kelp crabs are out foraging more at night when some of our gulls and other diurnal predators. That's awesome. That's what Alyssa was just sharing. the molt of another kind of crab. So you can see they have to, we get to buy our new clothes at the store when our clothes get too small. They have to regrow arm coverings, eye coverings, even their gill coverings is what Kelly was just showing there. All right, there was a question about dog whelks, but it flashed so fast. I missed it, but maybe. So Kelly is showing us, if anybody, you cannot fish for crabs in the Puget Sound, but in this marine preserve here, but if you do like to fish for crabs, you might know how to tell the difference between a male and a female, because you're only allowed to take the crabs that aren't molting when it's crabbing season. So if you look on the bottom of the carapace here, the females have a wider part because that's where they hold the eggs, and the males underneath here comes to more of a sharper point. All right, I think we're gonna find a couple more organisms for you here. I'll slowly move to share one of the kelp crabs that we're just surrounded by out here. They are just all around us, and we are almost at the water line here, and there's a lot of kelp crabs out there foraging.
Joanna, we do have a question. If you find a hole drilled in a clam, can you tell if it was made by a dog whelk or a moon snail?
I can answer this
Oh,
one.
Kelly's got one here for us.
There you go.
There you go.
This is a moon snail.
On a point. So every clam is going to be a little bit different, but most likely this was a moon snail because of the size of the hole. Dog whelks, if you remember, don't have quite that big a radula. That'd be pretty impressive if they drilled that hole.
They also like to eat barnacles a little bit more.
And Kelly is telling us here that they tend to feed on barnacles more than bivalves or clams. All right, I think I'm gonna pass it back to Alyssa and Carly as we find our next animal.
All right, awesome. I'm seeing some other questions that have come in as well. And one of them was about the barnacle eating Dorids and how they get access to the inside of the barnacle shell. So they have that same radula, that special toothed tongue that a lot of mollusks or snails have. And so they actually use that to drill straight through the side of that barnacle. And they can kind of ingest them by putting some of their stomach acid, secreting it in there, and then kind of slurping a little barnacle smoothie out of their shell. So maybe not the most glamorous way to get a bite to eat, but it certainly gets the job done. And I also saw someone would like to know, we're curious about the different types of nudibranchs on that slide. So I'm going to go back to that to share some of those other common nudibranchs. Because I love to talk about nudibranchs, so you don't have to ask me twice. So it looks like I'll go ahead and start out on the top. We'll go across that top row. So that first one is a frosted nudibranch. And those are ones that I find more common subtidally rather than intertidally. So intertidal would be you're walking along the beach at low tide, and subtidal would be your scuba diving or your snorkeling. Not to say that you can't find them in the tide pools, I just have found them a little bit deeper more often. So that's a frosted nudibranch. The next one in the center on the top row is a leopard dorid. So it kind of looks like it's got those leopard spots on it. This is another pretty common one that we'll find while tide pooling, exploring at low tide as well. Right next to it is a sea lemon. And that is another type of Dorid as well. So there's kind of two main groups of Nudibranchs. There's the Dorids, which have that kind of little butt poof on them. So you can see that on the lemon Dorid and the leopard Dorid. They've got that little poof on their rear end, and that's actually where they're breathing. So those are like little dermal gills, little gills that are allowing them to get oxygen out of the water. And then moving to the bottom row, we have got a Shaggy Mouse. That is one of the most common ones that we'll find on the beaches around here. They're kind of that brownish tan color. And that is the other type of nudibranch, an aeolid nudibranch. So they have the shag along their whole body, those gills along their whole body as well. And a lot of these nudibranchs will actually eat animals like hydroids and sea anemones, animals that sting. And the really cool thing about nudibranchs is they'll actually take their stinging cells without setting them off, without detonating them, and they put them into their own body as a defense. So they're like stealing their superpower of stinging and putting it in their own body so they can sting other animals, which is pretty cool. And then in the bottom, those last two are the ones that we already kind of talked about, but in the center, that's the barnacle eating Dorid again. And the last but not least is the opalescent nudibranch there, which is another aeolid with the shag along its whole body, lots of gills there. All right, it looks like our naturalists are set up again at a different rock. So, oh, very cool. I can't wait to hear about this next critter.
All right, we have another fan favorite here, one that students get so excited to find on our field trips, as do I every time I come out here. A sea star! This is an ochre star, also called a purple star. Even though it's called a purple star, it sometimes is orange as well. And sea stars are incredible organisms. Right now, it's hunkered down in this dark place here to stay cool so it doesn't dry out. But when the tide comes in, it'll pull in water through this hole on top of its body and push the water out from its 2 feet. And that's how it moves. Underneath each of its arms, it has hundreds, if not thousands, of little tube feet that it will move around the seafloor with. When it's hungry, it does just the opposite. It'll pull in water with those 2 feet and pull and pull and pull on a clam or a mussel. Sometimes it will pull for hours until that mussel or clam shell has to relax, open up the shell just a littlest bit. And the sea star will stick its stomach into that clamshell, digest the clam chatter, and then slurp its stomach back in. So these are echinoderms. I'm going to get my science fingers wet here. They have really spiny skin. So it's fun if you find one to get your fingers wet and touch it ever so gently. I was very surprised by how it felt. And Kelly found this is cool. This is a jingle shell, an easy one to remember. Jingle shell, jingle all the way. This is a type of native oyster, and we often find them stuck to the rocks. So it's kind of rare to find this one. You can actually see where it was connected to the rocks. And Kelly's heard them jingling before. I have not myself heard these jingling. I mostly seen them glued onto rocks. And while we're here, I thought I would move very slowly to not make you all sick, but show a cousin of a sea star. Let's see if you can see it in here or if it's maybe this one just under the, Oh, sorry to move too fast here. This is our sea cucumber. Thanks, Rose is going to point. So they also have that radial symmetry. They hang out on the rock, and when the tide comes in, they stick out their feeding parts and grab their lunch as it floats on by. Some sea cucumbers, when they get super agitated, they can, if a predator comes up to them, they can spit out their guts, so spit out their insides. The predator will eat the guts, and then the sea cucumber can regenerate their insides. So that's a really cool feature of our echinoderms as well, that regeneration. I wish that humans could do that. I think that's just incredible. All right. I think it's kind of hard to see from this view, so I think Alyssa's got some better photos of sea cucumbers to show you all. We were really wanting to find an octopus for you all out here. We do sometimes find giant Pacific octopus out here on the beach. But I tell you, these sea cucumbers, the first probably 100 times I was out here, when I saw them, I was convinced it was an octopus arm. So this might be the closest we'll get to one, showing you all one tonight. All right, back to you all.
All right, I'm gonna share another picture of that sea cucumber so that you can get a better view of that. You can see at the bottom here, this is a burrowing sea cucumber, so it's kind of coming out of the rock like that. And at the very bottom, you can see its little feeding tentacles coming out there. These guys are detritivores, so they kind of eat everybody's leftovers, any detritus. I kind of think of them as the Roombas of the tide pools or the vacuum cleaners of the ocean. They recycle all that yummy nutrients, just like earthworms do for us on land. So here are some better shots. Hopefully you can get a good view of these guys. All right, I know we're getting kind of towards the end of our time, so I wanted to check in with you, Carly.
Well, we had a question about the crabs that are out there, about the kelp crabs and what they are foraging for.
Yeah, kelp crabs are omnivores, so they will eat a little bit of everything. They're not too picky. So really any kind of animals that they can get their hands on, dead or alive. Crabs are often considered detritivores, just like those sea cucumbers. So they're kind of the bottom feeders, eating leftovers. Yeah, they're powerful and they're strong, so they can catch things sometimes, but oftentimes they're a little too slow and they don't have the best vision. But it depends on the species of crab. But yeah, they'll pretty much eat anything they can get their hands on. So algae, fish, other crabs. But yeah, like Jackie mentioned before, all these invertebrates, animals without backbones that we've been meeting tonight, a lot of them are masters at regeneration. So when crabs get in a fight with another crab, they'll get a limb bud next time they molt, next time they lose their shell, and they'll regrow those limbs. Sea stars will regrow their arms if they get into a scuffle with another animal. And those worms that we met earlier, a lot of the worms that you'll see on the beach, if they get split in half, they can become 2 individual worms. So these animals are pretty incredible in a lot of ways. It looks like we've got some footage of the waves at the beach.
Yeah, hello. I just wanted to show you that the tide is coming in hot. We are getting a lot of waves here, trying to show them to you. It's definitely compounded by the wind for sure. This isn't all just the tide coming in, but just wanted to give you a little shot of that. This is what we're about, gosh, I don't know, just a couple feet here from right where we were looking at those dog whelk eggs that Joanna was talking about. So I think we're going to have to start heading back up the beach, but just wanted to give you all a shot of this beautiful Puget Sound water coming in. And maybe say that might be all from us on the beach, and turn it back over to you all. Thank you so much for tuning in with us.
I think that's really nice. As the tide comes in, you all are fading out. But the nice thing is our interests do not fade for this marine system, which is super duper cool. So I will say thank you to all the field naturalists who are out there while most of us are inside staying warm. And thank you to Alyssa as well.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us tonight. Hopefully you've been inspired to get out on the beach on your own, do some exploring, bring along that field guide as a resource and find some awesome critters.
Yes, and as we had mentioned earlier, the tides are low at night during winter. They will be low during the daytime come spring and especially in summer with some of those super low tides. And we will be printing off a lot of these beach guides and putting them in by our bulletin board so you can pick them up and use them. They're printed on right in the rain, so if they get a little wet, that's okay. And if you're looking for something else to do next Saturday, you can help out some birds, because it's the Great Backyard Bird Count, which is a global science project. So if you have 15 minutes to spare from Friday through Monday, the 12th through the 15th, and you count birds for 15 minutes, you can submit that online, and that helps researchers find out where birds are across the world. And since we like birds and we like being birdie and nerdy, we're putting on an event ourselves. We're putting on a Bird Fest event. So you can go to our website to find out more about that, environmentalsciencecenter.org. And we'll have presentations for multiple ages, from little ones to adults, to help inspire you to learn more about your birds. And we have resources on there as far as books and brochures and even games that help you learn about the birds. So definitely check those out if you get a chance. And we'll be doing some online presentations like this as well. So again, we appreciate you joining us all tonight and today, whenever you're watching this, and hope to see you in another way. Thanks you all.